The silent void. The endless black of space stretched around them like a giant, unbroken sea. The Zerakian fleet floated quietly in the void, their massive ships glinting under the dim light of a distant star. For the first time in centuries, there was peace. The Zerakians had crushed every resistance, destroyed every rival, and brought the galaxy to its knees. They had fought long and hard, and now, they believed, the war was over. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, High Commander Viren stood tall, gazing at the vastness outside the ship's viewing panel. His scaled skin shimmered faintly under the lights. Pride filled his chest as he looked over his victorious fleet. "Let it be written," Viren declared to his crew, his voice echoing with authority. "Today marks the end of war. The galaxy belongs to the Zerakian Dominion." The bridge crew, busy with their controls and monitors, erupted in cheers. Across the fleet, similar celebrations broke out. The Zerakian warriors roared in triumph, toasting their victory with glowing red drinks. But deep in the shadows of the galaxy, something stirred. Far from the celebrations, a Zerakian scout ship patrolled the outer perimeter. It was a routine mission, one meant only to ensure no stragglers from the defeated factions lingered. Lieutenant Cray, a younger Zerakian officer, yawned as he monitored the ship's long-range scanners. Nothing ever happened this far out, and he hated being stuck on these missions. Another quiet day in the void, Cray muttered to himself, tapping his claws against the console. But then, the scanner beeped. Cray frowned. It was faint, barely detectable, a shadow, almost invisible against the blackness of space. "Odd," he muttered, adjusting the settings to get a better reading. The shadow was large, far larger than any ship he'd seen before, and it was moving. Slowly, deliberately, it glided through the void, coming closer with each passing moment. "Commander Viren needs to hear about this," Cray said, his voice trembling. Back on the Eternal Dominion, the celebrations were interrupted by a sharp, urgent signal. The high-pitched alarm echoed across the ship. Commander Viren turned sharply toward the communications officer. "What is it?" he demanded. The officer hesitated. "A report from the outer patrol, sir. Lieutenant Cray has detected something." "Something." Viren's voice was sharp. "Be clear, officer." "It's large, sir, and it's heading directly for us." The bridge fell silent. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. For years, they had fought against rebellions, pirates, and rival empires, but nothing had ever approached the Zerakian fleet without fear. "Put it on the main screen," Viren ordered. The viewing panel flickered to life, showing the faint outline of the shadow. It was almost invisible against the dark background of space, but its shape was unmistakable. It was a ship. A massive ship, larger than anything in the Zerakian arsenal. "Impossible," Viren whispered. "Scan it. I want to know what we're dealing with." The sensor's operator worked quickly, her claws flying across the console. After a moment, she froze, her eyes wide. "Sir, the scans can't penetrate it. It's emitting a signal, one we've never encountered before." Viren's scales darkened, a sign of his growing unease. "Send a message. Whoever they are. They must know they're trespassing on Zerakian territory." The communications officer nodded and transmitted a warning signal. Seconds passed, then minutes. No response. The shadow continued its steady approach. On the patrol ship, Lieutenant Cray watched in growing fear as the shadow grew larger on his screen. It wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and armor unlike anything he'd seen before. "This can't be," he whispered. "The humans are gone. We destroyed them." But deep down, Cray knew the truth. The shadow's size, its silence, its deliberate movements, it all pointed to one thing. Humanity wasn't gone. And this wasn't just any ship. It was a human battleship. On the Eternal Dominion, Viren paced the bridge, his claws clicking against the metal floor. He didn't like this. The Zerakians had conquered every human colony, wiped out their fleets, and taken their worlds. There was no way humans could have survived. Yet, here was the evidence. A ship unlike any in the galaxy, moving with purpose, heading straight for the Zyrakian fleet. "Sir," the communications officer said suddenly, her voice trembling. "We're receiving a signal." Finally, Viren said, "Put it through." The bridge fell silent as a deep mechanical voice filled the air. "To the Zyrakian Dominion," the voice said, cold and emotionless. "This galaxy does not belong to you. It belongs to humanity. Prepare for judgment." The transmission ended. Viren stared at the viewing panel, where the shadow now loomed larger than ever. It was close enough to make out the details of its hull, battle scars, massive cannons, and a symbol that sent chills down his spine. A clenched human fist. "Raise shields," Viren shouted. "Prepare for battle." But it was too late. The shadow began to glow, its weapons charging with a fiery light. The Zyrakian fleet, caught off guard, scrambled to defend itself as the first blast erupted from the human battleship, lighting up the void with destruction. And in that moment, the Zyrakians realized the truth. They were never safe. The first encounter. The Zyrakian fleet, once the pride of their empire, was now a chaotic storm of panic. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion buzzed with frantic energy as officers shouted orders and alarms blared. High Commander Viren stood at the center, his normally calm demeanor shattered. His piercing yellow eyes locked onto the viewing panel, where the human battleship loomed like a nightmare given form. "It's impossible," Viren muttered under his breath, his claws gripping the railing so tightly that the metal bent. The humans were wiped out, their colonies burned, their fleets crushed. But the evidence before him said otherwise. This ship, the size of a small moon, its hull bristling with weaponry, was proof that humanity had not only survived, but had somehow thrived in the shadows. And now, they were back. Meanwhile, aboard the mysterious battleship, in the heart of the human vessel, a lone figure stood on the command deck. Captain Elias Ward, a man who looked more machine than flesh, stared at the holographic display before him. His cybernetic arm glowed faintly as it interfaced with the ship's systems. The Zyrakian fleet was laid out in perfect detail, each ship marked, every weak point analyzed. "Pathetic," Elias said, his voice a blend of human grit and mechanical precision. They grew soft, arrogant. They never saw this coming. Behind him, an AI avatar shimmered into existence, a humanoid figure made of light and data. Its voice was calm, calculated. "Captain, the fleet's defenses are minimal. Shall I initiate the next phase?" Elias smiled, a cold expression devoid of joy. "Not yet. Let them squirm a little longer. I want them to feel the fear we felt. I want them to know what it's like to be powerless." Back in the Zyrakian fleet, "Commander," shouted a tactical officer aboard the Eternal Dominion, "the human ship isn't responding to our attacks. Our missiles are being intercepted, and energy blasts aren't penetrating their shields." Viren's scaled brow furrowed. "What shields? Our scans don't even detect an energy barrier." "It's something else," the officer stammered. "A field of some kind. It absorbs everything we throw at it." "Enough," Viren roared. "Deploy the interceptors. Surround that ship and board it if you have to." Across the fleet, smaller Zyrakian ships, sleek, agile craft designed for close combat, broke formation and raced toward the human battleship. The Zyrakian pilots were fearless, trained for years to face any enemy. But as they approached the shadowy colossus, unease gripped them. The ship didn't move, didn't fire. It simply hung there, silent and ominous, as if mocking their efforts. The first wave of interceptors. Zyrakian pilot Rykard led the charge, his hand steady on the controls. Close in, he ordered his squadron. Find a weak spot and... Before he could finish, a beam of pure white light erupted from the battleship. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a pulse, a wave of energy that spread out in an arc. Rykard's ship trembled violently, his systems failing one by one. "Sir, my controls are dead," a panicked voice crackled over the comms. Rekar tried to respond, but his ship was already drifting, its engines lifeless. All around him, other interceptors faced the same fate, rendered helpless by the strange energy. In seconds, the entire squadron was disabled, left floating aimlessly in the void. On the Eternal Dominion, "Commander, we've lost contact with the interceptors," an officer reported, her voice shaking. Viren's jaw tightened. What in the void is that ship using? It's not just advanced technology. It's something different. Suddenly, the human battleship moved. Slowly, deliberately, it turned toward the center of the Zyrakian fleet. Its massive cannons began to glow with a fiery red light, the buildup of energy so intense that even the Eternal Dominion sensors couldn't fully comprehend it. And then it fired. The beam was not a weapon of precision. It was a flood of raw, destructive power. One Zyrakian battleship vanished in an instant, disintegrated into nothingness. A second ship was struck on its flank, its armor peeling away like paper, exposing its core. Explosions rippled across the fleet as debris scattered into the void. Aboard the human ship, Captain Elias Ward watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. "One shot, and they're already in disarray," he said. "Humanity deserved better than what they did to us. Now, they'll pay." The AI avatar tilted its head. "Your personal satisfaction aside, Captain, we must ensure no survivors, if even one ship escapes." "They won't," Elias interrupted. "They think this is just one ship. They don't know the truth." Back in the Zyrakian fleet, High Commander Viren slammed his fist against the console. "Retreat," he barked. "All ships, fall back and regroup." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The human battleship wasn't just a threat, it was a message. And the message was clear. Humanity had returned, and they were stronger than ever. The viewing panel flickered, and a transmission appeared. A human figure stood tall, his face scared but resolute. "To the Zyrakian Dominion," the man said, his voice like steel. "This is your only warning. Humanity has endured your tyranny long enough. Surrender your fleets or face total annihilation." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. For the first time in his career, High Commander Viren felt something he'd never known before. Fear. The opening salvo. The Zyrakian fleet was in chaos. Ships scrambled to regroup, their formation shattered by the devastating first attack from the human battleship. Alarms blared across the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as High Commander Viren stared at the tactical display. 1/3 of his fleet had already been wiped out, and the rest were vulnerable. "Commander," one of the officers called out, her voice trembling. "The enemy ship is charging its weapons again." Viren's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. "Deploy the dreadnoughts," he barked. "Focus all firepower on that ship. Do not let it fire another shot." The remaining Zyrakian dreadnoughts, massive warships bristling with heavy artillery, moved into position. Their cannons aligned, targeting the human battleship. Energy cores hummed as the fleet prepared to unleash a concentrated barrage, one capable of reducing entire planets to rubble. "Fire," Viren commanded. A volley of bright plasma beams and high-energy missiles streaked across the void, converging on the human ship. The sheer brilliance of the attack lit up the darkness, creating a blinding spectacle. But when the light faded, the battleship remained unscathed. Aboard the human battleship, Captain Elias Ward leaned against the command console, his cybernetic eye scanning the incoming data. "They're desperate," he said, almost amused. "Throwing everything they have, yet they still don't understand." The AI avatar appeared beside him, its form flickering. "Their weapons are impressive, but their understanding of physics is primitive. Our graviton shielding absorbed the energy with minimal strain." "Good," Elias replied. "They need to see that resistance is futile. Let's remind them." The battleship's massive cannons rotated, locking onto the remaining dreadnoughts. One by one, the weapons charged, glowing with an ominous red hue. Unlike the Zarakian barrage, the battleship's retaliation was slow, deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. In the Zarakian fleet, Viren watched in horror as the human ship fired. The first blast struck a dreadnought directly in its core, slicing through its shields as if they didn't exist. The ship exploded in a cascade of fiery debris, its remains scattering across the void. "Commander," an officer cried, "the dreadnoughts are falling one by one. We can't stop them." Viren clenched his fists. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. He had faced countless enemies in his career, but nothing like this. The human ship wasn't just powerful, it was calculated, surgical, and merciless. "Pull the fleet back," Viren ordered reluctantly. "We need to regroup and—" Before he could finish, the tactical display flickered. A new energy surge appeared on the screen, something massive, far beyond the battleship's previous attacks. What is it doing?" Viren asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The human battleship's secret weapon. Captain Elias Ward watched as the final preparations completed. The ship's central cannon, a colossal device buried deep within its hull, began to glow. It wasn't an ordinary weapon, it was a relic of humanity's last desperate war, a weapon designed to end entire armadas in a single strike. "This is where we make our mark," Elias said, his voice filled with grim determination. "Activate the Nova Core." The AI hesitated. "Captain, the Nova Core's output may destabilize the surrounding space. Collateral damage." "I'm aware," Elias interrupted. "Do it." The battleship's core unleashed a surge of energy, the light radiating outward like a miniature sun. The weapon fired, a beam of pure destruction that tore through space itself. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an announcement. A declaration that humanity had returned stronger than ever. The aftermath. The beam cut through the Zarakian fleet, obliterating everything in its path. Ships disintegrated instantly, their crews reduced to ash. Even the Eternal Dominion shook violently as the shockwave reached it. Viren clung to his command chair, his mind racing. How could one ship wield such power? How could they fight something so unstoppable? When the light faded, silence fell over the battlefield. Half the Zarakian fleet was gone, reduced to debris floating aimlessly in the void. The remaining ships drifted, their systems fried by the electromagnetic pulse that followed the Nova Core's strike. The human battleship stood alone, untouched, its hull glowing faintly from the energy it had unleashed. Aboard the human battleship, Elias leaned back, his mechanical arm whirring softly as he adjusted his stance. "And now we wait," he said. "Send the message." The AI complied, transmitting a signal across all channels. Moments later, the Zarakian fleet received a chilling broadcast. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Resolute Dawn. You have witnessed humanity's strength. Surrender now, or face total annihilation. You have one cycle to comply." Elias turned to the viewing screen, watching as the remaining Zarakian ships scrambled to regroup. He felt no pity, no remorse, only a cold satisfaction. "This is what they deserve," he muttered, "for everything they did to us." On the Eternal Dominion, High Commander Viren sat in stunned silence. His fleet, his pride, was in ruins. The Zarakian Dominion, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was being brought to its knees by a single human ship. What do we do?" an officer asked, her voice trembling. Viren closed his eyes, his mind racing. Surrender wasn't an option. Zarakian pride wouldn't allow it. But fighting meant certain death. "We need more information," he said finally. "Find out where that ship came from. There must be more of them. This can't be their only weapon." As the remaining ships began to retreat, Viren couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humanity had returned, and their vengeance was far from over. The desperate counterattack. The remnants of the Zarakian fleet drifted in the aftermath of the human battleship's devastating assault. Fires raged aboard the crippled ships, and emergency teams scrambled to stabilize their systems. High Commander Viren stood rigid on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his scaled hands gripping the edge of the console. His fleet, his empire's pride, had been brought to ruin by a single vessel. But Viren was not one to surrender. "Commander, the fleet is in disarray," an officer said, her voice strained. "The dreadnoughts are gone, and the patrol ships have been disabled. Our reinforcements are hours away." Viren's eyes narrowed. Hours they did not have. "What about our stealth teams? The elite infiltrators?" "They're still operational, Commander," the officer replied hesitantly. "But are you suggesting—" "Yes," Viren interrupted. "If we can't destroy that ship from the outside, we'll dismantle it from within." Aboard the human battleship, Captain Elias Ward stood on the command deck, observing the scattered remnants of the Zyrakian fleet. His cybernetic enhancements fed him real-time data, the positions of enemy ships, their power levels, their desperate attempts to regroup. "They're stalling," he said aloud. "They're planning something." The AI avatar materialized beside him, its translucent form flickering. "Correct, Captain. Long-range scans indicate several Zyrakian stealth craft maneuvering toward us, likely an infiltration attempt." Elias smirked. "Let them try. They'll learn what it means to challenge humanity." The infiltration begins. 3 Zyrakian stealth ships, sleek and nearly invisible, slipped through the void. Their pilots navigated with precision, using the debris of their fallen comrades as cover. Inside each craft, squads of Zyrakian elite infiltrators, renowned for their skill and ruthlessness, prepared for what could be their final mission. Team leader Rinok, a battle-hardened warrior with years of experience, addressed his squad. "Our mission is simple. We breach their defenses, locate their core systems, and disable that monster from the inside." The infiltrators nodded silently. Failure was not an option. The stealth ships approached the human battleship, their cloaking fields shimmering faintly as they maneuvered to dock. Automated turrets swiveled in their direction, scanning for threats, but the infiltrators' technology was advanced, and they passed undetected. Moments later, the ships latched onto the battleship's outer hull, and the infiltrators began their boarding operation. Inside the battleship, the Zyrakians expected corridors of chaos and disarray, but what they found was unsettling. The interior of the human battleship was eerily silent. The walls pulsed faintly with energy, and glowing conduits ran along the floor and ceiling, casting an eerie red light. "This isn't a ship," one of the infiltrators whispered. "It's a fortress." Rinok motioned for silence. "Keep moving. Split into teams and plant the charges. We don't need to understand it. We just need to destroy it." The teams split, navigating the maze-like corridors with practiced efficiency. But as they advanced, the ship seemed to come alive. The walls shifted, openings appeared where there were none before, and strange mechanical drones emerged, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. The battle within. The first encounter was swift and brutal. A Zyrakian soldier fired at one of the drones, expecting it to fall easily. Instead, the drone adapted, absorbing the energy and retaliating with deadly precision. The infiltrators fought back, their plasma rifles lighting up the corridors, but for every drone they destroyed, 2 more appeared. "This isn't normal AI," Rinok muttered, firing another shot. "It's learning from us." As the Zyrakians pushed deeper into the ship, they encountered something even more disturbing. Human remains, preserved in glass chambers. Some appeared to be ancient, but others seemed recent. Each was connected to a network of glowing wires, as if the ship was drawing power from them. "What kind of madness is this?" one soldier whispered, his voice filled with fear. Rinok shook his head. "Don't lose focus. Keep moving." The core room. After losing half their team to the relentless drones and the ship's traps, Rinok's squad finally reached what appeared to be the core. It was a massive, pulsating sphere of energy, suspended in the center of a cavernous chamber. Strange symbols, clearly human in origin, glowed faintly on its surface. "This must be it," Reinach said, signaling his team to plant the charges. As they worked, a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and mechanical. "Futile. You will not leave this place alive." The Zerakians froze, weapons raised. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Captain Elias Ward. His cybernetic enhancements glinted under the red light, and his mechanical arm hummed with energy. "You think you can destroy humanity's legacy with explosives," Elias said, his voice laced with disdain. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Reinach snarled. "You're just a relic, a machine pretending to be human." Elias's smirk faded, replaced by cold determination. "Perhaps, but I am humanity's vengeance." With that, the chamber erupted into chaos. Elias moved with inhuman speed, his cybernetic enhancements giving him the edge over the Zerakians. Plasma fire filled the air, but the captain dodged and countered with brutal precision, his mechanical arm crushing weapons and soldiers alike. The mission fails. One by one, the infiltrators fell. Reinach, wounded but defiant, managed to activate the charges. "You may kill me," he growled, "but this ship will burn." Elias tilted his head, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly. "You're persistent. I'll give you that." Before Reinach could detonate the charges, the core pulsed, sending a wave of energy through the chamber. The explosives disarmed instantly, their circuits fried. Elias stepped closer, his voice cold. "This ship isn't just a weapon. It's alive. It learns, and it's far beyond your comprehension." As the last infiltrator fell, Elias stood alone in the core chamber. He glanced at the remains of the Zerakian team, then at the glowing core. "Is this what fear feels like for them?" he asked the eye. The avatar appeared beside him. "Indeed, Captain. And it's only the beginning." Elias turned, his gaze fixed on the tactical map of the galaxy. "Then let's make sure they remember it." Boarding the beast, the Zerakian fleet was in tatters, its morale shattered. But desperation breeds boldness, and High Commander Viran was not one to give up easily. With their elite infiltrators lost and their fleet scattered, he devised a final gambit. A coordinated strike to board the human battleship with the remaining forces. "We won't win from a distance," Viran said, pacing the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. His scaled hand swept over the holographic display of the battlefield. "We've studied humans for decades. They always build around a single point of weakness. That ship is no different." An officer hesitated. "But, Commander, the infiltrators." "We're a probing attempt," Viran interrupted. "Now we act with precision. Load our boarding pods with shock troops and heavy armor. Aim for their docking bays and exposed conduits. We don't need to defeat their whole ship, just disable their core." The officers exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. Orders were given, and across the fleet, the remaining forces prepared for one final desperate mission: the launch. The Zerakian boarding pods, small and heavily reinforced, launched in waves from the remaining ships. They streaked across the void, weaving through debris and evading automated defenses. Each carried a team of soldiers armed to the teeth, their resolve hardened by the knowledge that this might be their last mission. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Viran watched the pod's progress, his claws digging into the railing. "They'll either cripple that ship," he muttered, "or die ensuring our survival." Aboard the human battleship, Captain Elias Ward stood motionless on the command deck, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly as it scanned the battlefield. The Zerakian boarding pods were like insects to him, numerous but insignificant. Still, he admired their persistence. "They're trying again," Elias said, his voice devoid of concern. The AI avatar materialized beside him, its form shimmering. "Your orders, Captain. Shall I deploy defensive drones?" Elias shook his head. "Let them board. I want them to see it for themselves." The Zerakians breached the ship. The first wave of boarding pods slammed into the human battleship's hull with bone-rattling force. Cutting lasers hissed as they melted through reinforced plating, creating breaches large enough for Zerakian soldiers to enter. The troops poured in, weapons raised, scanning the eerie corridors. The interior of the ship was unlike anything they'd encountered before. It was a labyrinth of glowing walls, shifting pathways, and strange, organic designs that pulsed with energy. The air was thick, almost alive, and the faint hum of the ship's systems resonated through their bodies. "This place, it's not a ship," one soldier muttered, his voice trembling. "It's something else." "Focus," barked their commander, Ralvik, a hardened veteran who had survived countless battles. "We have a mission. The core is our target. Move out." As the squads advanced, the corridors seemed to react to their presence. Walls shifted, closing off certain paths and opening others. The glowing conduits on the floor flickered, and strange, mechanical drones emerged from hidden alcoves. These were not the crude war machines the Zerakians were used to fighting. These drones moved with purpose, their sleek forms and adaptive responses making them formidable opponents. The first encounter was brutal. Plasma bolts ricocheted off the drones' reinforced shells, while their energy weapons tore through Zerakian armor. But the Zerakians pressed on, their sheer determination driving them forward. The heart of the beast. After fierce skirmishes and heavy losses, Ralvik's team finally reached what appeared to be the heart of the ship, a massive chamber bathed in an eerie red light. At its center floated a colossal sphere of energy, suspended by crackling beams of light. Strange symbols, ancient and unmistakably human, glowed on the walls. "This must be the core," Ralvik said, his voice tinged with awe. "Plant the charges. We end this here." As the soldiers moved to set explosives, the chamber darkened. A deep, resonant voice filled the air, sending chills down their spines. "You shouldn't have come." From the shadows stepped Captain Elias Ward. His mechanical frame glinted under the red light, and his cybernetic arm pulsed with energy. Behind him, a dozen advanced combat drones emerged, their weapons trained on the Zerakians. Ralvik raised his weapon. "Stand down, human. Your ship ends here." Elias tilted his head, his cybernetic eye scanning the soldiers. "You think you understand this ship? You think you can destroy what you don't even comprehend?" Ralvik fired, but Elias moved faster than any living being should. In a blur, he closed the distance, his mechanical arm grabbing the weapon and crushing it like paper. The room erupted into chaos as the drones opened fire. The revelation. Amid the battle, Ralvik found himself face to face with Elias. The captain's expression was cold, almost pitying. "This ship isn't just a weapon," Elias said, his voice low but commanding. "It's humanity's legacy. Every system, every drone, every inch of this vessel was built from what you left us." Ralvik growled, struggling against Elias's grip. "We destroyed you. We wiped out your colonies, your fleets." Elias's mechanical arm tightened, and Ralvik winced in pain. "You destroyed our homes, but not our spirit. We hid, we adapted, and we rebuilt. This ship isn't just metal and circuits, it's alive. And you're nothing but an intruder." As Elias spoke, the core behind him flared to life, its energy surging outward. The Zerakian soldiers who had managed to plant charges suddenly found their devices deactivated, the circuits fried by the core's electromagnetic field. Ralvik stared at the glowing sphere, realization dawning on him. "It's not just a weapon. It's an eye." Elias released him, stepping back. "It's more than that. It's a monument to everything you tried to destroy. And now, it's your end. The final stand." Ralvik, battered but defiant, rallied his remaining soldiers. "If we die here, we die fighting," he roared. The Zerakians charged, their weapons blazing, but the human drones and Elias were relentless. One by one, the Zerakians fell, their efforts futile against a force they couldn't fully understand. As the last soldier fell, Elias stood in the center of the chamber, the glowing core casting a haunting light over the carnage. He turned to the AI avatar, which watched silently. "They've seen enough," Elias said. "Transmit the footage to their fleet. Let them know what awaits them if they continue." The AI nodded, and across the galaxy, the Zerakian Dominion received a chilling broadcast. Images of their fallen soldiers, the glowing core, and the implacable figure of Captain Elias Ward. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. The truth behind the battleship. The Zerakian fleet floated in silence, its remnants huddled together like prey waiting for the Predator's final strike. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, High Commander Viren stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the transmission looping across every screen. The images of their fallen infiltrators, the glowing energy core, and the implacable human captain sent chills down his spine. This is impossible," Viren whispered. "A single ship. One man." An officer hesitated before speaking. "Commander, this isn't just a ship. It's something more. Something ancient." Viren clenched his fists, frustration boiling beneath his calm exterior. "Then we need answers. I want every piece of intelligence we have on this so-called battleship. Where did it come from? How is it this powerful?" Aboard the human battleship, Captain Elias Ward stood in the command center, his gaze locked on the tactical display. The Zerakian fleet had ceased its attacks, their movements hesitant and disorganized. He could feel their fear, their desperation, and it fueled him. The AI avatar appeared beside him, its form flickering with faint energy. "The Zerakian command ship is scanning us. They're searching for answers." Elias smirked. "Let them. They'll find nothing but the unknown. But it's time they learned the truth." The AI tilted its head. "Are you certain, Captain? Revealing the origin of this ship may embolden them." Elias's mechanical hand rested on the console, his fingers drumming softly. "No, it won't. They need to understand why their time is over." The transmission. A sudden alert echoed through the Eternal Dominion. The main viewing panel flickered, and a face appeared. Captain Elias Ward, his expression calm yet commanding. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Resolute Dawn," he began. His voice was steady, laced with authority. "You fought well, Zerakians, but your time is over. It's time you understood why." Viren stepped closer to the screen, his jaw tightening. "Go on, human. Enlighten us." Elias's cybernetic eye glowed faintly as he continued. "This ship is not just a weapon. It is the culmination of centuries of survival, ingenuity, and vengeance. When you burned our colonies, slaughtered our people, and erased our fleets, you thought you had won. But you didn't kill humanity. You forged it." The screen shifted, displaying ancient footage of humanity's downfall. Zerakian ships razing cities, human fleets overwhelmed by alien firepower, and countless refugees fleeing into the void. The images were haunting, even to Viren. "You forced us into the shadows," Elias said. "But in those shadows, we thrived. We scavenged, we adapted, and we built something you could never comprehend. The Resolute Dawn is not a ship. It is a legacy. A living entity, powered by the last remnants of humanity's greatest minds and warriors." Viren's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, living entity?" Elias's smirk returned. "The core you tried to destroy isn't just energy. It's us, the minds of our greatest scientists, strategists, and leaders, preserved and integrated into this vessel. The Resolute Dawn doesn't fight alone. It fights with the knowledge and will of generations." The Zerakian reaction. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell into stunned silence. Viren's officers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken. "This isn't war," one officer murmured. "It's vengeance." Viren growled, silencing the murmurs with a wave of his hand. "Enough. It's still a ship. It can be destroyed." Elias's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You think so? Then why are you retreating? Why do your forces hesitate? You feel it, don't you? The fear, the inevitability. A stark choice." Elias leaned closer to the display, his gaze piercing. "I'll offer you one chance, High Commander. Surrender now, and I may spare what remains of your fleet. Refuse, and I'll show you what true annihilation looks like." Viren's claws tapped against the console as he considered his options. "And if I surrender? Do you plan to enslave us? Eradicate us?" Elias's expression softened, though his tone remained firm. "No, humanity doesn't need to destroy you. You've already destroyed yourselves with your arrogance. But if you force my hand, I will end the Zerakian dominion here and now." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in tense silence. An uneasy decision. Viren turned to his officers, his mind racing. He had never faced such an opponent, one who fought not just with weapons, but with history, strategy, and sheer psychological dominance. "What are your orders, Commander?" an officer asked hesitantly. Viren's gaze shifted to the tactical display, where the resolute Dawn loomed like a dark god. He knew that fighting would mean the destruction of his fleet and possibly his entire species. Yet surrendering would mean admitting defeat, a humiliation the Zerakian dominion had never endured. Finally, Viren spoke, his voice heavy. "Signal the fleet. Tell them to stand down." A turning point. Aboard the resolute Dawn, Elias watched as the Zerakian ships powered down their weapons and moved into retreat formation. The AI avatar appeared beside him, its voice calm. "They've surrendered, Captain." Elias nodded slowly, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Good. They've learned their place. Transmit the terms of their surrender. And ensure they know this. If they ever threaten humanity again, there will be no warnings." As the human battleship loomed in the void, the Zerakian dominion realized a harsh truth. The humans they had once dismissed as weak were now the galaxy's most powerful force. The dawn of a new era. The Zerakian fleet hung silently in the void, their weapons powered down, their pride shattered. High Commander Viren sat in his chair aboard the Eternal Dominion, his shoulders slumped as the full weight of the surrender bore down on him. The bridge was quiet, save for the occasional beeping of damaged systems and the whispers of his stunned crew. Before them, the human battleship Resolute Dawn stood like a shadow of inevitability, its massive frame a monument to humanity's unyielding will. The Zerakians had survived countless wars, but this defeat felt different. It wasn't just a loss, it was a reckoning. "Commander," an officer whispered, breaking the silence. "We've received the terms." Viren turned slowly, his scaled face betraying no emotion. "Read them." The officer hesitated. "The humans demand the immediate disarmament of our fleet, the dissolution of the Dominion's military operations, and the release of all occupied human colonies." A murmur spread across the bridge, a mix of disbelief and humiliation. "They're dismantling our empire." Another officer growled. "They'll leave us defenseless." Viren raised a clawed hand to silence them. "And the alternative?" he asked coldly, already knowing the answer. The officer's voice trembled. "Total annihilation. The human awakening." Aboard the Resolute Dawn, Captain Elias Ward stood at the center of the command deck, observing the Zerakian fleet's surrender through the holographic display. The AI avatar materialized beside him, its form flickering as it processed the data. "Their fleet has complied, Captain. Weapons are offline. Their command ship is awaiting further instructions." Elias's mechanical eye focused on the Eternal Dominion. "They think this is the end," he said, his voice low and reflective. "They don't realize it's just the beginning." The AI tilted its head. "The beginning of what?" Elias turned away from the display, his gaze distant. "The rise of humanity." He stepped forward, addressing the ship's internal systems. "Activate the beacon. Signal the others." Across the Resolute Dawn, dormant systems began to hum to life. Panels glowed, conduits pulsed, and the ship itself seemed to vibrate with energy. A powerful signal burst from the ship, a pulse that rippled across the galaxy. The hidden fleet. Far beyond the Zerakian Dominion's borders, in the forgotten edges of space, the beacon reached its destination. Buried beneath the sands of desolate planets, hidden in the rings of gas giants, and cloaked within asteroid fields, other ships stirred. These weren't ordinary vessels. They were humanity's hidden armada. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering and resilience, built in secret during humanity's darkest days. The Resolute Dawn had been their flagship, their test of survival. Now, with the beacon's call, the rest of the fleet awakened. Engines roared to life. Long-dormant systems flickered back online, and artificial intelligence cores reactivated. One by one, the ships rose, their sheer number dwarfing anything the galaxy had ever seen. A new purpose. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the Zirakian officers watched in stunned silence as dozens, no, hundreds, of human ships began to emerge on their scanners. The fleet seemed endless, a wave of power sweeping across the galaxy. This wasn't their only ship, one officer whispered, his voice filled with dread. It's an entire armada. Viren stared at the display, his claws digging into the armrest of his chair. He felt a strange mix of fear and respect. The humans hadn't just survived, they had prepared for this moment for centuries. "Commander," another officer said, his voice trembling, "what do we do now?" Viren closed his eyes, his mind racing. The Zirakian Dominion was no longer the galaxy's dominant force. The humans had claimed that title with their return. But even in defeat, there was an opportunity, a chance to avoid complete destruction. "We adapt," Viren said finally. "The Zirakian Dominion will not end here, but it will change. We will learn from this, and we will survive." The galaxy watches. The beacon's signal wasn't just a call to humanity's fleet. It was a declaration to the entire galaxy. Across countless systems, other species watched as the hidden human armada revealed itself. Messages spread like wildfire, rumors of humanity's resurgence growing with every passing moment. Some species celebrated, hopeful that humanity's return would challenge the oppressive reign of the Zirakians. Others trembled, fearing the rise of a new, unstoppable force. For centuries, humanity had been a forgotten story, a cautionary tale of hubris and extinction. Now, they were a legend reborn. Elias's final message. As the newly awakened fleet gathered, the Resolute Dawn transmitted one final message across the galaxy. Captain Elias Ward's face appeared on screens in every corner of known space, his voice calm but commanding. "To all who hear this, know that humanity has returned. We do not seek conquest, but we will not bow to tyranny. For too long, we were hunted, broken, and forgotten. Those days are over." His mechanical eye glinted as he continued. "This is not the rise of a new empire. This is the dawn of a united galaxy. Join us, and together we will build a future free of oppression. Resist us, and you will face the full might of humanity." The message ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. A new era begins. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Elias stood silently, watching as the fleet formed up around his ship. The galaxy had changed forever, and he knew the weight of humanity's return would ripple for generations. The AI avatar appeared beside him. "Captain, the Zirakians have surrendered. Their fleet is retreating. The galaxy is yours." Elias shook his head. "It's not mine. It's ours. Humanity didn't rise from the ashes to dominate. We rose to ensure no one else falls as we did." As the fleet began its first coordinated movement, a quiet determination settled over Elias. Humanity's return wasn't just about vengeance. It was about creating a future where no species would face extinction again. The battleship surged forward, leading the armada into the unknown. The galaxy's future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had returned, and they weren't just surviving. They were leading.